Our first lesson today is from John 16, verses 13 through 15. But when the Spirit of truth comes, it will guide you into all truth. It will not speak on its own. It will speak only what it hears and what it will tell you what has to come. It will glorify me because it is from me that it will receive what it will make known to you. For all that belongs to the Father is mine. That is what I said, the Spirit will receive from me what it will make known to you. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. Our second scripture lesson for today comes from the book of Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 through 23. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all in his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of all your evil behavior. But now he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation. If you continue in your faith, established and firm, and do not move from the hope held out in the gospel. This is the gospel that you heard, and that has been proclaimed to every creature under heaven, of which I, Paul, have become a servant. A couple of weeks ago, I started to watch a show on Netflix, and the show is called Young Sheldon. The title character is a 10-year-old super genius named Sheldon, who is simultaneously incredibly cute and extremely annoying. Young Sheldon is so bright that his parents have sent him to high school, where the 10-year-old is often bored because he already knows everything. In the show, I was intrigued by young Sheldon's interactions with Pastor Jeff and his discussions of science and religion, which are major themes in this show. In one such conversation from season 1, Sheldon calls out the pastor right during the sermon, and they have a conversation right in front of the congregation. During their exchange, Sheldon quips, "Science is facts. Religion is faith. I prefer facts." There's a lot to unpack in this little quote by young Sheldon. What does Sheldon mean when he uses the word facts? Is he talking about truth? Does he mean reason? Is religion really only about faith, or are there some facts that we can know about God and Jesus and Christianity? Is science truly only about facts? Or is science more nuanced and has more commonalities with faith than young Sheldon supposes? Let's start with just the facts. The word fact has traditionally been understood and universally accepted to be something that may be checked by reason, experiment, personal experience, or may be argued from authority. A fact is something that does not change, even if you believe it or not. A fact is related to the word truth. Basically, a fact is a true datum, something that is verifiable with your five senses, observable and based on our shared human physical reality. A fact can also be a number in a mathematical equation, a 2 + 2 = 4 level of factual truth. But objective facts and truth have been under attack in Western society for quite some time. Now, you've probably heard this phrase: "That may be true for you, but it's not true for me." This is basically the concept of relative truth, in which there is no objective reality or standard upon which facts can reliably be based and accepted as an absolute truth for all human beings, despite their opinions or perspectives. In this way of thinking, everyone has their own personal truth, and thus they cannot be challenged about their personal interpretation of fact. Now, a person could attest that their personal truth is that 2 + 2 does not equal 4, but that 2 + 2 would equal 5. While this idea of relative truth may sound good in our struggle for human equality, with no person able to tell other people what they should think, the problem with this relativistic way of reasoning is that it actually relies on one huge and basic objective truth. And that is that relativism itself has to be objective and unrelatively and always true. Philosopher Norman Geisler explains it like this: "Most relativists believe that relativism is absolutely true, and that everyone should be a relativist. Therein lies the self-destruction nature of relativism. The relativist stands on a pinnacle of an absolute truth and wants to relativize everything else." But because of this philosophy of relativism, today in 2024, we have seen this concept of facts being warped and degraded. In 2017, the concept of alternative facts arrived in our consciousness as things that people wished were true or wholeheartedly believed to be true. But instead of qualifying their statements as hopes and dreams, they instead insisted and acted as if though their hypothetical reality was in actuality true for everyone. We see this on the internet now all of the time. Someone states their opinion as a fact, and soon other people are believing it, even though their personal truth has no evidence in objective reality. With the recent availability of artificial intelligence and the ease with which people can create deep fake photographs or even make a fake recording of the president's voice saying something that they would never say, the importance of verifying your information and quoting only trustworthy sources today becomes more important than ever before. Now, verifying sources and checking your evidence and quoting reliable sources is something that science has historically been very good at. There's a reason that scientists run their experiments even thousands of times, as well as get their papers, their trusted peers to review and evaluate their scientific papers before they publish them. Over time, theories become accepted as facts by other scientists, especially when other experiments based on that fundamental fact prove reliable. But with the scientific method, even widely accepted facts can sometimes be challenged, and the whole fundamental understanding of science can sometimes be changed. Remember, there was a time when all scientists believed the fact that the earth was flat, and their truth was that the sun revolved around the earth. Scientists are able to move forward with their science not only because they do research based on accepted facts and try to prove their theories and hypotheses to advance human knowledge further, but because they work with faith that the facts that they are working with are assumptions that are indeed true. Every scientist works with an ounce of faith along with their pounds of factual truth. In a similar way, there are many scientists who are Christians, who have investigated Christianity and have found faith in God both reasonable and reliable. So who is one of the greatest scientists who is still alive today? I would argue for Dr. Francis Collins. Francis Collins was born in 1950. He grew up on a small farm in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley. Unquestionably brilliant, he graduated from high school at the age of 16, and he went off to the University of Virginia to study chemistry and physics. He graduated with honors and then was accepted at Yale to get his PhD in chemistry. It was while he was at Yale in a course on biochemistry that Francis first learned about the molecules of DNA and RNA, which carry the genetic codes for human life. And so while he was writing his dissertation for his chemistry PhD, he applied for and got into the medical school at the University of North Carolina. Being on the medical human side of things, instead of the theoretical side of things, was a brand new experience for Francis. It was while he was an intern in medical school that Francis first encountered people of faith. Francis noted that some of his patients, who were going through terrible illnesses and awful treatments, were clearly relying very heavily on their faith as a source of strength to get them through their tough diagnoses. Instead of being mad at God for making them sick, these patients were at peace, and their belief was a source of great comfort and reassurance to them. Even though many of these people knew very well that they were going to die from their diseases, they did not perceive their impending deaths to be a horrible thing. They were completely secure in their future. Francis found these people of faith to be really puzzling, unsettling. He just couldn't figure them out. He considered himself to be a practical atheist. He was used to not believing in anything that he couldn't see or prove for himself. But then a thought brought him up short. Francis had never investigated religion for himself. He had just been living with the assumption that faith was all superstition and just psychological leftovers from a pre-scientific era. Certainly, as a scientist, he needed to at least ask some basic questions of religion and investigate it. If he was going to live by the philosophy that he needed to test every hypothesis, that meant he needed to test faith. So Francis Collins sought out a local Methodist minister, and he met him with a big list of questions and bold accusations. And it was during that conversation that the minister recommended that Francis read C.S. Lewis's book, Mere Christianity. Francis did, and he found out that faith in God is something that you can get very close to through rational thought and plausible arguments. After reading Mere Christianity and some other C.S. Lewis books, Francis Collins knew he needed to make a decision, but he still hesitated. He was afraid to make that commitment. He was afraid that becoming a believer was going to hurt his reputation as a rigorous scientific scholar. He was worried that if he decided that he believed in God, that his belief was going to cost him, because then he would have to act in accordance with that belief. For about a year, he wrestled with the decision. Then one day, while hiking in the Cascade Mountains, almost overwhelmed with the beauty of creation all around him, Francis felt he could not resist God another moment, and he said yes to believing in God. He was 27 years old, and he still describes that decision to be the most significant moment in his life. God became alive and personal and real to Francis Collins from that point on. And Francis knew that God had a purpose for his life and that he should not be afraid to follow it. Trusting in God to continue to guide him in his work on genetic diseases, Francis Collins was amazed when in 1993 he was asked to lead the Human Genome Project that was funded by the National Institutes of Health. For the next 15 years, Francis' work was to oversee billions of dollars worth of research that sought to map out the human genetic code. By June of 2000, they had finished the rough draft of the human genome. And by 2003, the entire human genetic sequence was mapped out. Many people consider this achievement to be the most important undertaking in the whole history of science. But God was not done with leading and guiding the life of Dr. Francis Collins. In 2007, Francis used a large chunk of the funds he had earned from his scientific research and his many connections to start a nonprofit organization called the BioLogos Foundation. The purpose of this organization was to invite the church and the world to see that there is harmony between science and biblical faith. As the small nonprofit organization started to grow, it invited thousands of faith leaders and scientists to conferences to dialogue about evolution and faith. The foundation was a huge success. Francis's own initial fear to talk to the scientific community about questions of faith became the humble starting point for creating many dialogues between the church and the scientific community. And you will be interested to know that BioLogos is headquartered right here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So, what does all of this mean for us here today? In our 2024 world of artificial intelligence, alternative facts, and relativistic truths, we as disciples of Jesus need to be advocates of reason and objective and quantifiable reality. Objective truth is knowable and discoverable. It is our work to research, to question, to constantly be searching for a better understanding of both the world that we live in and the God that we love and serve. Science and faith are brothers, not enemies. Every scientist has hope that their experiments will be successful and has faith in their hypothesis that they will prove reliable. And every Christian has based their faith on the fact that both God and Jesus do exist, and that Christianity is a rational and reasonable way to understand the universe and themselves. My friends, may God give us all the knowledge that we need in order to live out our faith in this time and place, so that we may be at peace with God for all eternity. So be it. Amen.